Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, Goon Squad, and welcome back to yet another edition of the Football Goons Podcast. Lucky number 67 for the group here. We're starting to – I think we're grizzled vets at this point. Are we getting close to that?
I'm grizzled. I don't know about a vet, but I'm grizzled.
That's true. I'm not sure what the number is there, but we'll quantify it at some point. You don't feel grizzled? I feel like you're a little suns –
or a vet.
You're a little suns out, guns out tonight.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's hot. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm toasty right now. There's no air conditioner. There's no fan running. You know, I don't want to scare away our viewers or anything like that.
Ugh.
If you know what I mean. But I'm just saying, it's a little warm in here.
I really hope you up our female viewing.
Be nice.
Has some chance.
I don't like our chances.
I don't either.
All right. Well, wherever you are, whenever it is, we're thrilled you decided to spend a little time with us as we just go on continuing to talk about the greatest game on earth. If you're checking in on iTunes, Libsyn, Google Play, or TuneIn Radio, make sure you leave us a review. Help us climb the charts. You'd be surprised how far that goes for us. As we continue our assault on the industry, we're growing, and we need to keep it up. We'd also like to give a shout-out, as always, to those of you tuning in live on YouTube who just got scared by Rocco's biceps, as we continue to carve out time to spend with you, the Goon Squad, every Sunday night here at 9:30. So outside of Rocco being a little bit toasty right now, how's everybody feeling this week?
I feel great. I feel tired. I just got a new addition to my family, and we just bought a new puppy, and waking up through the night really sucks. It's really not great.
Not a good time, huh?
No, it's not great.
I could sympathize with you there. Different reasons, but I could sympathize with you there. Listen, what happens, like, speaking of all that and, like, rest and everything, it's already Sunday night. Like, is there, like, a conspiracy out there, like, for the weekend to just be sucked away? Like, you guys work a lot on the weekends. You coach on the weekends and stuff. Like, I don't have that crazy schedule for the weekend, too, but I still feel like, bang, it's Monday. Like, what happened?
Yeah, it's
Time
the worst.
flies when you're having fun, man.
Like, did all the bosses get together and say, like, hey, let's, secretly, like, speed the clocks up?
It's a big boss conspiracy going on.
Possible.
I guess so.
I'm feeling pretty great this week. We had I don't know that we've ever brought this up for our listening public, but I'm the head junior high coach at the school I teach at, and we had a 7-on-7 tournament yesterday. Come home champions, got some T-shirts out. So kicking off the 2017 season in the right way. Anytime you're a wing T football team, we probably might run the ball once or twice this year. And we can go out and win a passing tournament. You got to feel pretty good about your chances on the season. So
nice,
kicking it off good for us.
Love it.
So last week,
running that wing T. Do you like running backs?
A little bit.
Like
that's a perfect segue. Literally the next sentence out of my mouth. Last week we hit everybody with our top 25 quarterbacks entering the season here fantasy-wise. This week we're all just a little bit giddy as we move on to the meat and potatoes of fantasy football. We join the running backs in the backfield, man. We want to talk about these backs. You will not win a fantasy league without paying just a little bit of attention to this position here. I think the zero RB strategy kind of came up huge last year, and everybody who didn't follow our suggestions and they followed instead the industry trends, let's just say you didn't bring home any hardware last year. I can pretty much guarantee it. If you ignored the running back position last year, you spent 4 months pretty sad. So what we're going to do here tonight for you guys, we're going to cover our top 20 running backs. We usually kick 25 at you, but once I got to the next tier, I just felt like it was forcing it a little bit. You can follow the rankings for how we feel about those players, but instead we're going to opt to kick around a few questions of guys we think might hop up, hop down the boards based on how we're going. So we'll get there when we get here. But first, we're going to break down our top 20 in groups of 5. We ready, gentlemen?
I was born ready.
We're born ready. I like it. All right. So
this is my favorite. This is my favorite group, not because of the position, but because I know I'm going to fight with South tonight. I know what's going to happen. It's my favorite.
It's not even going to take long at all.
No, not even a little bit.
All right, so here we go. Our top 5. I think we're pretty consensus here with the rest of the fantasy industry. We've got David Johnson number 1, Le'Veon Bell number 2. Ezekiel Elliott coming in third, LaShawn McCoy at 4, and number 5, we are with the LA Chargers and Melvin Gordon. So the first thing we'll talk about across the board, we have South, we have Miles, and we have Deal, and that is our top 5 in slightly different orders. Rocco, however, has Jordan Howard coming in 5th, bumping Melvin Gordon down to 6th. So talk to me a little bit about that, Rock. Why do you feel so good about the second year back out of Chicago?
I'll be 100% honest. This is more of like a gut feeling for me, and it's a 5A to 5B situation. I gave Howard the nod because he had such a phenomenal rookie year with kind of a really poor team around him. And not that Chicago got worlds better. There's still going to be a lot of question marks there. But I think that they're going to be a little bit more stable than they are this year, which is going to give him a little bit better situation to produce. The Melvin Gordon thing I think we all love Melvin Gordon. And I think we expect big things from him. But if you really look at his numbers, he hasn't been able to play a 16-game season yet. You know, his max yards was last year at 997. He's averaging under 4 yards a carry for his career. You know, the 10 touchdowns last year was huge, but those are his only 10 touchdowns in 2 seasons, as he failed to reach the end zone at all in his rookie campaign. So as much as we love Melvin and we look for him to have a lot of upside, there are some question marks in LA. You know, they drafted wide receiver Mike Williams. Keenan Allen will be back for at least week 1.
Maybe.
You know,
we'll see.
We think we got to wait and see what happens there. You know, they have Hunter Henry. They have the receiving options. Like, I'm just a little bit more scared of Melvin than I am of Howard. That's just my opinion. And I think like I said, we fall in love with guys, and Melvin was such a great college player that we just like he can't possibly not turn into the player that we want him to be. But we still haven't seen it yet. You know, we saw it with Howard. And I'm going to give him the nod, 1-spot nod, we'll call it, you know, because we've already seen it with him, and we're really still waiting for Melvin to break out. The 10 touchdowns was great. I got to see above a 4 yards per carry. I got to see a 1,000-yard season before I'm just ready to just bump him right into the top 5. Because if some of those touchdowns fall and go to Mike Williams in the red zone that went to Melvin Gordon, same stat line makes him not even a top 10 back. You know what I mean? So That was just my thinking on the situation.
I got to tell you, the hammer was going to fall a little bit harder on you, and then you kind of quantified your thought process, which is going to ease the speed of the drop of the hammer a little bit. I don't know how we're saying that we haven't seen it with Melvin Gordon. I mean, we saw it last year, and again, you know, there was an injury concern at the end of the season, so if you want to flag that area, you can. But he played on the most injury-depleted team probably in the history of football last year. And he was still a stud. I mean, punching the ball in the end zone when everybody knew it was pretty much going to have to be him. You know, he was still very productive. But he's facing a lot of 7- and 8-man fronts because there wasn't a ton of respect for what the Chargers were throwing outside. So I think that when you talk about you know, these 2 players specifically, I do think the Bears got a little bit better, but I am so less confident in the Bears offense as a whole than I am on the Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to be a scary good team this year. They're going to be productive as an offense. They're going to be able to move the ball very efficiently, and I think that Melvin Gordon is going to be a huge benefactor of that. When you look at his rookie year, he only had 184 carries. You look at last year, they bumped that up to 254. So he would have went over 1,000 if it wasn't for the injury. You know, we're probably looking at a dozen touchdowns if he doesn't get injured. So those are running back number 1, top-tier numbers coming out of a guy who's going to have every opportunity to be the guy this year. And I love Jordan Howard. You know, I've jumped on that train very early last year, but I just don't think that the Bears as a whole, offensively, are going to be able to touch what the Chargers can do.
I think the question kind of becomes between the two, like, and I'll just add to South's argument, one of the biggest problems with the Chargers last year was no interior line, and they drafted the 2 best guards in the draft. So that's helpful. But, you know, I think the argument of the 2 players, because I do have them 5 and 6 as well, and I'm not going to beat up Rock for having. I'm all right with that, but the argument becomes: do you want the marquee player on the bad team, or do you want the guy who's going to have to share the ball a little bit, but the offense is far better? So, I'm not sure what the correct answer is on that. Generally, I lean towards players on better offenses. I mean, like, we all still love Devontae Freeman. We're going to talk about him in just a couple minutes. He's in our next tier. I mean, tell me he doesn't have to share the ball, but we love him because Atlanta is one of the top 2 to 3 offenses in the entire league. And I think LA's got a chance to be in that top 5 discussion, assuming they stay healthy. Maybe they got out of whatever was in the water in San Diego. LA might give them a little bit better luck. I'm not sure, but
it's still a big assumption.
Right.
I have heard that LA's water is much better than San Diego's.
Yeah, I don't know. I got to tell you, my research doesn't go quite that deep.
I just to circle back, I just have a hard time with it because, we Miles, you and I love Devontae Freeman, but he's lower on our board because he has to share the ball with everybody else. You know what I mean? So, and I look at Melvin the same way, especially considering that, Deal is Mr. Consistency. Melvin hasn't been able to stay healthy for an entire 16 games yet.
Well, he's played 2 seasons. It's not like he's played 14. Like,
okay, but 2 of 2.
two of
like,
2. Last year was a little bit of an anomaly. I know what you're saying, but
I think we make exceptions for the players that we like when it comes to injuries, is what I think. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't make exceptions for anybody else.
If it's 3 of 3 this year, next year is it going to be a lock, or is it? Or are we going to make it?
No, then we got a problem. I think.
You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like we've seen 2 of 2. South, whether or not he would have or wouldn't have gone over 1,000. I mean, he probably would have because he's at 997.
3 yards.
I think he'd have gotten 3 yards.
But
he's not Jeremy Hill.
But he didn't. But he didn't. And I guess my point is, Howard was on a bad team last year and finished second in rushing yards, and now his team is at least slightly better. Melvin's team was on a pretty decent team. Phillip Rivers still threw the ball pretty successfully last year. Let's not forget that. You're adding more offensive weapons in the receiving game. I'm not going to guarantee that he gets in the end zone 10 times again. Not with Mike Williams in the red zone and emerging Hunter Henry and Antonio Gates is still there. Let's just take all these things into consideration and not assume that Melvin's going to go, stay at 10 touchdowns a year for the rest of his career. He had 0 in year 1. 0. He's averaging 5 a year. So I think that's where we should be looking at him.
Wow.
Not at 10.
Not 5. That's
no,
absurd.
that's absurd. I understand that, but 10 touchdowns is not like the norm. You know what I mean? Like that's
it is for an RB1.
Double-digit touchdowns is like an elite category.
Yeah, there were 7 with 10 rushing touchdowns.
Exactly. That's the elite running backs.
What about total touchdowns?
Quite a few more, but if you weren't doing that, then Melvin Gordon's now a 12 touchdown player.
Right. And
that's
what I'm saying. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. He's a better receiver than 2 receiving touchdowns. So you have to add to that. And I won't prolong this anymore. I'll just add that I think it is underrated, and we're going to talk about it. At least I'm going to talk about it a little bit in a little while here. I think it's underrated how much it helps a really good running back when they add some good receiving weapons.
Yeah.
And they did that. So
he can't see stacked. I mean, and when we say stacked boxes, I mean, teams are going to have to play them straight or Rivers is going to break 5,000.
At least.
And that's not superlative. I mean, he will throw for 5,000 yards if teams stack boxes on Gordon. Absolutely. Now, as a fantasy owner, if you draft Gordon, that doesn't help you at all. But the point remains that defensive coordinators know they can't do that, so they won't.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about this top 3. We're Yahoo players. If you're outside of Yahoo, that's your prerogative. That's where we choose to go, though. And their projections in standard league have these top 3: David Johnson, Lev Bell, and Zeke Elliott, 50 or more points ahead of the rest of the running back market. That's huge because remember, we're not talking PPR here. We're talking, 500 yards. Obviously, some of that's touchdowns, but you're probably talking, 200 yards and 5 touchdowns more than the rest of the league at running back. You guys in on that?
I'm out.
I'm out.
I'm out.
So you think they're just going kind of crazy with the early projections here?
Yeah, I think that our next three, McCoy, Gordon, and Howard, are going to be much closer to that top group than a lot of people want to admit or give into. I think after that is where we might see a more steep drop off. But I think the top 6 backs are all going to be, very similar numbers: 12 to 1,500 yards, maybe somewhere on the higher end, but. Nobody's going to pull away from that. And we should look for double-digit touchdowns out of all those guys. So I don't think you're going to see a 50-point difference between, 1 and 6.
Now, can I – because, Deal, you were quick to say no. South, how do you feel there?
I actually don't think it's that crazy, other than McCoy.
So here's my response to this. Last year, LaShawn McCoy finished 3rd. McCoy had 1,600 total yards and 14 touchdowns. He finished 36 points behind Zeke. He finished 77 points behind David Johnson. And he only finished 2 points ahead of Lev Bell, who missed 3 games. So with that knowledge, is it that crazy?
I still think that it's a stretch because
77 points behind David Johnson.
Here's exactly what I wrote down before you even said that. I think 1 or 2 of them will, but not all 3.
Not all 3. Okay.
Yeah.
I think David, I'll rephrase. I think they're all going to be close. If any of them were to pull away, obviously it's going to be DJ, because especially if you're in a PPR league, or even if you're not in a PPR league, but you're at least getting their receiving yards, David Johnson, for all intents and purposes, is going to run for 1,000 and receive for 1,000 this year.
He already said it.
He said he wants to do it. So, I mean, I've already been proven wrong once by him, so I'm not going to bet against David Johnson again. So if he says he's going to do it, I'm going to take him at his word.
Yeah, I'm going to just throw this out there because we've talked about this internally, but it's not really on record yet. I don't think it's that far-fetched. However, I'm super high on the LaShawn McCoy train this year. I'm predicting that he's going to lead the league in rushing yards this year. I'm talking like 1,500 yards rushing on the ground. And that's not even counting in, what he's going to do through the air, which has been less and less over the last couple of years. But from everything that you read, everything that you see, they're really catering that offense right around him specifically. So, I mean, they want Tyrod to do things that are going to accentuate his game specifically. So, I just think that this is a guy that if he could come near, those touchdown levels that those top 3 guys are going to have, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him as like the number 2 or number 3 overall fantasy running back.
And he absolutely could, because his main competition for carries, which was legitimate competition last year in Mike Gillislee, is now in New England. So, I think the shady, we've talked about tiers, and I've really started to buy in and become a believer of drafting in tiers. And I think those top 3 are 1. And then I actually have Shady alone. And I really like Melvin. I like Howard. I like actually the next 6 or 7 guys, but I think Shady is just a shade behind those top 3, but he's still definitely, I mean, my last question here is there any reason this shouldn't be the top 5 picks of your draft?
Can we say top 6?
I know Rocco thinks it should. I'm more using that to drive home the point that, we're big believers, guys. Don't buy into this receiver thing. I mean, you need to be taking these backs.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. I think everybody knows that. But if I'm picking after 5 and one of these guys is available, I'm hugging the guy that messed up in the prior pick because mistakes were made there.
Enjoy Antonio Brown. I'll take Shady at 6.
The absolute only way that one of these guys shouldn't be drafted in the first 5 is if you personally, like Rocco, rank Jordan Howard or Devontae Freeman ahead of them. There needs to be at least 5 running backs in a row in every single league, no matter scoring settings, drafted.
I'm not trying to hug anybody, but I'll gladly forfeit that last piece of pizza that's sitting over in the box. Let them have it, out of respect. Nice. So.
All right, let's move on here to our next 5 guys. We've got 6 through 10. The aforementioned Jordan Howard is our 6th back. Then we've got Devontae Freeman, 7. Jay Ajayi at 8. Leonard Fournette, the rookie, at 9. And then last year's number 1 pick in a lot of leagues. Todd Gurley is number 10. So my big thing with this tier, all 5 of these guys have question marks, and you have to weigh as an owner, how much do those question marks hurt you? I mean, Howard, second-year player on a bad team. Good line, but a bad team. Devontae Freeman, how much is he going to lose to Coleman and the passing game? Ajayi, is he going to gain some more consistency? Fournette, rookie for the Jaguars. I mean, there's a gigantic question mark. And then Gurley, I firmly believe, especially as a Georgia fan, the rookie Gurley is the player he is, but as a fantasy player, is he 2015 Gurley or is he 2016 Gurley? What are you getting? So who do you guys in this group of 5 trust the most and then trust the least? And I want to focus here on think consistency. If you're going to pick this player, let's say every league, each one of these guys is probably a top 15 pick. So I'm not drafting and being like, cool, I got 30 this week. I'm cool with 3 next week. That's not going to be okay. So which of these guys do you trust the most and least? And let's just remove Rocco. You can't say Jordan Howard.
I was gonna say I won't pick.
That's
Howard.
Clearly your answer.
Yeah.
Are you gonna make him not pick Jay Ajayi too?
As his most, good pick Jay Ajayi.
Listen, my most, I guess most, I'm still gonna roll with Freeman. I am scared of the timeshare with Coleman, but he's just Miles. You and I have talked about this, and we're in 100% agreement with it. If it wasn't for Tevin Coleman, he'd be up there with DJ and Bell and Elliott. He's just such.
He'd be my number one player without a doubt.
I think I'd still have him behind DJ, but he'd be up there in that same group, So I think I just like this talent, and even if his touches get diminished a little bit, I still like him to do the most with his touches. So that'd be my most is Freeman.
I trust Freeman the most, absolutely, but I trust Todd's situation the most. And he's a veteran that's done it before. He was awesome 2 years ago. Howard was a rookie last year. Freeman, as we've covered, has a stud behind him. Jay was so up and down. Fournette's a rookie. So while I trust Freeman the most, I trust Todd's situation the most. I just think it's the most solid situation there. And obviously I'm still not trusting Ajayi the most because we just haven't seen it, the consistency.
You know what? Go ahead, Seth.
No, finish your thought.
I was going to say, it makes sense that Deal feels that way also, because Deal also has Todd rated higher than the other 3 of us and higher than, some of the other guys that we have on the list. So
right.
Obviously he's backing it up with the way he feels in his rankings.
For me, the guy that I trust the most, and I'm not even going to put hesitation to it, is Freeman, because we kind of get scared about this Coleman being on his heels thing, but like the last 2 seasons, he went for 264 carries and 227 carries. While that did drop a little bit last year, obviously, that's still a lot of carries. There's a lot of volume out of that offense as a whole. There's a lot of snaps out of that offense as a whole. So, and for a guy who has the same home run potential as David Johnson, as Lev Bell, like there's not a lot to distrust there. So, I mean, that's for me. The guy that I trust the least, I'm not going Jay Ajayi. I know you want me to. It's Todd Gurley, but it's only because I don't quite agree on his situation. He is the feature back. It is an offense that is going to have to lean on him a little bit.
I like those things.
But now you're completely changing over your offense from what it was. I mean, eventually it's got to get better because it wasn't very good. But I think it's going to take time. And I don't know do we really have the patience to take 5 or 6 weeks with Todd Gurley this year before we all panic and freak out about it based on what we saw last year. And I think that's what we're going to see this year out of him.
Dude, their offense was terrible 2 years ago too. So now it's better than that.
I don't know.
It has to be.
If you really break down what he was in 2015, though, he was really big play dependent. Really big.
I mean, I think that's who he is, though.
Well, it is in a sense of that his upside is he's as big play as anybody in the league.
Right.
But I need him to be able to get 5 when the line blocks it up for 2. And he didn't do that last year. He showed 0 patience to the hole. None. So when the line blocked it up for 2 yards, he got 2 yards. And that, I think that was my issue with Todd, is his line's not very good, but a great back can still make that doable, and he didn't. Now, the good news with that for me is, by all accounts, he's realized that and has accepted that, and he's going to move on. And I love the hire of Sean McVay. Not necessarily that, the Redskins running backs don't blow you away, but the Redskins offense did. So I think it's a situation where he's going to benefit from the fact that the Rams offense should open up a little bit. I love the signing of Andrew Whitworth to add, it's a terrible line, and they added a solid tackle. Goff in his second year with a better offense could open things up. So I actually wouldn't mention him at all. I totally agree. I think we're consensus here. I trust Freeman the most. He's never been a volume-dependent player. He doesn't get 300 carries. No. He makes things happen, and his offense scores a ton of touchdowns, so he's going to get his share of those. And I'm not as scared of Coleman because I've just seen too much about Coleman's integration into the offense being out of the slot. We talked about that in the past. He's obviously still going to get his carries, but I think they want to get the ball in Tevin's hands as a receiver more. So I think that hurts guys like Taylor Gabriel a lot more than it hurts Freeman. So I love Freeman. I don't trust Fournette. Listen, Fournette is a man. I mean, you love the skill set, but I'm not drafting a rookie from the Jaguars. I'm just not. I'm not going to take a rookie from the Jaguars.
Freeman, I won't do it. I'll go back to Freeman for a second, ask you three since you all said him. He lost almost 70 touches last season. How much you think it's
right? If he and he finished sixth in our half PPR league.
I know. So I mean, but it's going in that direction. We don't expect it. South has said it more than anybody. We don't expect it to swing back to him getting 70 more touches this season.
But he's also not going to lose 70 more.
But don't you think he's going to lose some more?
I don't think so.
I do. Listen, I do think he is.
With a guy that talented, he's only touching the ball. He's touching the ball less than 280 times, which, I mean, there are several backs that we've talked about already that got more than that in carries alone, but he still finished sixth.
But my point isn't that he's not the guy that can get that. They don't need him to. So I don't think there's any way that they keep giving him that.
But they didn't need him to last year. Why?
And he dropped 70. That's my point.
Well, to butt in here real quick, he did drop 70 touches. His rush yards were up. His rushing touchdowns didn't move. He had one less receiving touchdown. The receiving element of his game is really where it's taking a hit. So, I mean, if you want to highlight that area, that's really where Coleman kind of takes away from him a little bit. But I think from a rushing standpoint, he's not going to lose that much more than he did last year. And it was only marginal in yardage, 18 yards gained, compared to 2015. But there was no drop at all in his rushing production.
Here's my honest opinion on Atlanta is, listen, you might be right. And we've talked about the contract before where they may be thinking, listen, Freeman's not coming back, so we need to get Coleman more. If you're Atlanta and you're coming off a Super Bowl loss and you're 3 weeks in, and let's say you're taking some touches from Freeman and the offense isn't running the way it did last year. Now, listen, a logical mind might tell you it's because they have a worse offensive coordinator in there. It's very possible. But what's the first thing you're going to point to? We got to get Devontae back involved. We got to get the ball to him more. So for me, I can't imagine with him losing touches, the offense is going to be more potent. So I just, to lose 70 touches, you're not getting phased out any more than that.
No,
so I can see him getting the exact, I mean, obviously not exact, but the same workload he did last year. And I don't understand how, with any logic, you could think he's going to have a worse output with the same.
I think he'll have. I moved him down one. So it's not like I'm saying all this, and it's not like I have him at 14. I have him the same as two of you. So, but I think I move him down one slot.
All right.
Yeah, I think the important thing is even if he loses, let's say the trend continues, and obviously I'm not going to say 70, but let's say they cut him down to 200 rushing attempts, which is losing 20 attempts and cutting him down to 50 receptions. Okay.
I think that's likely.
Okay. I still like him. For 1,000 yards because he is a 5-yard a carry back with that offensive line and that offense around him.
1,000. I mean, I think probably probably 14 of these guys could be 1,000-yard backs. That's not
okay. But that's exactly where he was last year. I don't think the touchdowns is really gonna dip at all. I think that'll stay the same, because really what they do is the first 3 quarters, or for the most part, we get Devontae in the background and we get Tevin in the slot, and then in the fourth quarter we've seen Tevin come in and kind of run on people now that they're tired. So, and we've seen that approach with a lot of these dual backfields in the last couple of years. But Devontae is going to get his. I don't see any way that he doesn't. I don't think he's going to drop to 200. But what I'm saying is, if he drops another 20 attempts to 200 and drops down in receptions to 50, he's still 1,000-yard back with 10 touchdowns.
Could be.
Yeah,
Could be. All right.
Go ahead.
All right. So last question on this thing, and let's go around kind of quick here. I can tell the future, so good for me. And I know one of these players is going to finish 2017 as the top scoring running back in the league. Who is it and why?
This is such a tough question, but I think it almost feels like a cop-out to say this, but I think it's Freeman, because he's kind of been to the top of the mountain, so to speak. He's been near the top. So all it takes, honestly, is the right break for him. Meaning, Coleman doesn't pan out, or Coleman gets hurt, or whatever.
Meaning Coleman breaks his leg.
Yeah, I mean, if basically if anything at all happens to Coleman, and this is a guy who can probably put up historic numbers. So
right.
There is a very small part of me that wants to say Jay Ajayi just because of the home run potential, but I'll stay away from it because I could see Rocco's getting hot.
Hot, fire hot. And I'm going to cop out and say Jordan Howard.
That's fine.
Because he's in my top 5 anyway. So
right.
I picked Freeman because he did it 2 years ago. And it's not a matter of skill set for him, offensive line or anything like that. It's purely a matter of, does Tevin stay healthy and how much are they going to use him? If they give him, 220 and 50 range, I think he'll be 6 or 7 again. If they give him 265 and 75 range like they did 2 years ago, he'll lead the league.
I think it's Jay Ajayi. I won't bite my tongue.
Oh.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who's looking at a possibility of 350 touches and an offense that's definitely good enough to score, and their schedule is not exactly playing the Broncos and Seahawks and Cardinals every week. So, the easy schedule combined with the volume will be there, and a good offense that will score points. Now, if you're going to tell me Tevin Coleman's going down, it's Freeman, no doubt, but we can't predict that. So, all right, let's move on to our next 5.
I thought you could see the future.
I was lying.
Oh, okay. Let's move on then.
All right, 11 to 15 here, kind of that early end of the RB2, and where a lot of leagues are going to be won because a lot of people are going to have a good running back 1. If you've got 2, though, you're in great shape. So we're going Lamar Miller at 11, 12 DeMarco Murray, 13 Marshawn Lynch, 14 Dalvin Cook, 15 Christian McCaffrey. So I'm going to throw the same question that I did last week about a Tennessee Titan. Why are we so low on DeMarco Murray? I have him 9th. South has him 10th. Dealin Rock at 13. Guy was, if I'm not mistaken, the number 1 back a couple years ago. Then he had an off year in Philly. We're not going to talk about that. And then last year comes back and gets top 10 again in Tennessee. So why are we so low?
I think that a lot of it is that he's not a flashy player. So a lot of these guys that we have ahead of him, they tend to be home run hitters. And we don't really view DeMarco Murray in that same light. I mean, for whatever reason, we kind of look at him as more of a plotter, and he's really not. Like, he kind of walks a fine line between being a home run hitter or being a plotter. He's got probably one of the best offensive lines that he's going to run behind. But the big question mark is, how involved is Derrick Henry going to be? We saw last year in glimpses where Derrick Henry was an animal. He only had 110 carries. You have to figure that that's going to go up some this year as they want to try and get him a little bit more involved. He also stole away 5 rushing touchdowns. So you got to figure that there's the potential for that number to go up as well. So it kind of just feels too like Murray's kind of at that point where you're going to start to see a logical drop off based on the mileage on him. So I don't know. It's kind of like that Drew Brees thing where you're just kind of waiting for some kind of drop off, but there really hasn't been one.
Yeah, that was a bad example.
Yeah, that's
Why
a
are we
terrible
low? I don't
example.
know, because he's going to throw for $5,000 again.
So you're going to go ahead and move him up to 5, South?
Right.
Probably. I just did.
For me, I know I had him low as well. For me, it's two things. It's age / mileage, and it's Derrick Henry. Henry had not a great rookie year, but he did great with what they allowed him to do. So he came in, did exactly what they asked him to do. He stole some carries away. He stole some touchdowns away. I look for that, that his production to go up huge because I think that they're going to give him the ball a little bit more. Murray's 29. I know it's not the magic number 30 yet, but he's 29, and he's legitimately football 29. He's got 1,400 attempts already rushing the football. Mm-hmm. So even with that great offensive line, I think if they want to prolong his career and have this two-headed monster for a couple more years, it's going to mean that he drops down to a more realistic, from 293, we may see him take that dip down to like the 225 range, and see Henry get those extra touches. And that's just where it falls for me. I love Murray, the player. I don't look at him as a plotter. I love watching him run. I think he's smooth when he runs for a guy that's his size. But if we want to see him play till he's 31, 32, and they want to have this dual threat, they got to preserve him a little bit here.
Yeah, for me, it's similar to the Freeman situation. I think Derrick Henry is really good, like these guys said. And a lot has changed here for Tennessee by all measures. They should have a good receiving core now. Henry has his rookie year out of the way. Last season, after week 10, Murray didn't have a single 100-yard game, while he had 5 before that. And Henry picked up some steam at the end of the season. Before week 8, he didn't have a single game over 54 yards. After week 8, he played in 7 games and had over 58 in 4 of those. So his trend went up for him while Murray's went down. So I just like Murray to have a little bit of a drop-off. I don't think he's going to be a bad player, but I think Henry's going to take a good bit from him.
Right. All right, let's go one spot up in our rankings. And let's talk about Lamar Miller. Guy was a consensus first-rounder last year. A lot of people got burned by that. A lot of people just got burned by Houston in general last year.
Yeah.
I think as a group, we're projecting Deshaun Watson's going to end up their starting quarterback. How much does that help Lamar Miller kind of reestablish himself as maybe not a top-tier option, but kind of that next group down where getting him as the 11th back is going to be looked at this time next year as a major steal?
How much is it going to help by $1 million?
Quantify it by $1 million.
By exactly $1 million. Here's something that's going to blow your mind. I know you guys like stats, and a lot of our listeners do. Lamar Miller last year had the box stacked on him 22.6% of the time while they weren't in the red zone. So that part isn't that impressive. He was number 13 in the league as far as that stat goes, which is pretty high. Here's what's crazy. 48% of their run plays last year came with a 3-receiver set. That's crazy. That's how little defenses respected the Brock, while almost half of Lamar's runs came with a 3-receiver set. So they had less blocking, and pretty much all defenses had to guard them straight up with having that many receivers out. So with Watson in there, the defense can't stack the box as much, like almost a fourth of the time for him. And with that figured in, it's about half the time. So if Watson is as good as we think he can be, or as good as I think he can be, Lamar's in for a huge upgrade. And the potential we saw when he was in Miami, he's going to carry that over to a much better team.
See, the sad thing that I look at with Lamar is his rushing statistics minus the touchdowns are like identical to Freeman. And we praise Freeman for that.
Yep.
A better quarterback is going to improve the passing numbers, which were horrific for him. I mean, he's been known to be a pretty decent back out of the backfield. He had 31 catches last year. You know what I mean? That's that number. I look for that number to improve. I don't think he's going to approach.
He should be about 60.
He really should be. I don't think we're going to see him improve in the run game. He averaged 4 yards a carry last year. He averages 4.5 for his career, so he's not far behind. He was 1,000-yard back last year on 260 plus touches. I like the receiving numbers to get better, which obviously will make his value a little bit better in like a PPR, and we'll see that number grow because nothing can be worse than watching Brock Osweiler or Tom Savage play quarterback. Nothing can be worse.
Along
so
with what
Watson is going to be a little bit better than that.
Along with what you said, he has an upgrade because I look for him to go back up to about that 4.5. So say he has 250 carries, that's 125 more yards. And then say he gets 30 more catches, he's probably going to get 1 or 2 touchdowns in that. So that he automatically moves up probably 4, 5, 6 spots.
Right. All right. How about we're going to talk about Cook and McCaffrey in a little bit. Just real quick on Marshawn Lynch. What do you guys think about the new digs here in Oakland? What's his fit? What's your expectation for what Lynch is going to get?
I've said for weeks now, I love this move. One, we talked before how Oakland is, no less than 1C in offensive lines right now. It's Dallas, Oakland, and Tennessee. They got the best 3 offensive lines. Miles, I know you like Cleveland. They're up and coming, but as of last year, Oakland was one of the top 3 offensive lines. They have the weapons on the outside, so it opens things up. You're not going to see a lot of stack boxes. And this is, like I said, this is the first time that we're going to see Marshawn Lynch play football when he really wants. It seems like he wants to play football and he cares about it. Like he came out of retirement because he wanted to play for this team at this time. Like every other time we've ever seen Marshawn Lynch, it's basically just to get a paycheck or so that he doesn't get fined. So watching, we watch him go into beast mode. Can you imagine what beast mode is going to look like when he cares? Right. Like that, to me, that just says it all. So yeah, I'm in love with Marshawn Lynch. I'm not going to overdraft him. I think the value is still there for a lot of guys above him. But if he falls into my lap with my 3rd round pick, you can take that to the bank.
All right. Last tier we'll talk about here, 16 to 20. Let's go 16. We have yet another rookie, Joe Mixon. 17, Isaiah Crowell. 18, Carlos Hyde. 19, LeGarrette Blount. And at 20, Adrian Peterson. So my first question, I want to talk about Carlos Hyde a little bit because anytime you can talk about a 49er, you got to do it. What I do love about Hyde is he's headed into this Shanahan offense now that just made stars out of – we're arguing about Freeman and Coleman, and they're both very, very startable backs in fantasy. So what do you guys think about Carlos Hyde? Is he going to fit into that role? Does it work?
Carlos Hyde has a ton of running talent. I don't know that I'm going to put him in the same realm, obviously, as a dual threat. But all signs point to that Carlos Hyde could be that guy who's just a little bit of a workhorse kind of guy. He could run the ball 300 times for you and be productive with it. So I think that his value is going to go up. I think he's a little underdrafted right now, a little underappreciated considering that he's going to go into this running back friendly system and all the talent is there. So for me, I'm not gun shy at all about trying to scoop him up at some point.
Yeah, I think the value's there too. You're talking about a guy that he keeps putting up numbers. He's an injury risk, but he's not going to cost you a ton this year, I don't think.
No.
So you're talking about probably a 5th, 6th round pick, maybe a little before that. But at that point, you're not devastated if your 5th rounder doesn't hit.
If I get him in the 5th round, I'm going to do probably like a leap of joy. I'm going to give somebody a ridiculously high 5.
All right. So even 4th round, though, you're not.
I'll take it.
That's kind of my point. Like, you miss on Gurley last year in the 1st. You're way behind the rest of your league. You miss on your 4th round pick, you're all right.
Right.
You can
especially because if I get him in the 4th, he's my 4th running back. So I'm pretty pumped about it.
Great bait. All right. How about Blount and Peterson? You guys got new roles on new teams. Who shines more there? Blount in Philadelphia is kind of the feature back, assuming that Dougie P ever wants to run the ball this year, or Peterson, who's sharing time with the hated Mark Ingram and rookie receiving threat Alvin Kamara. Who's going to shine more here?
I think Blount shines more. Just my opinion. I just think his backfield is less crowded. We'll say that. Sproles and Smallwood are nice complementary players, but that's what they are. Ingram at least has the potential to be, maybe not in Sean Payton's offense, but at least has the potential to be a number one running back. Whereas I don't think, the other two guys in Philadelphia do. And Kamara's taken touches in the passing game, which is what they do to begin with in New Orleans. I just think the way it's set up right now, if everything stays the same, I think Blunt has a higher chance for success than Peterson does.
I think it's Blunt too. I think that the real appeal with Blunt is going to be the touchdown number, because if you look at what Doug Peterson tended to do, but also trended in the red zone, he was pretty stubborn about trying to run the ball once they got within scoring position and within striking distance. And who's going to be the guy that they're going to put the rock in his hand? Is it going to continue to be, these smaller backs who have a little bit more trouble getting some traction and plowing in there? Or is it going to be a guy who has proven over the past couple years to be able to pound it in from close in LeGarrette Blount? Ryan Matthews had 8 touchdowns last year in 13 games. He had a lot of red zone carries as well. And in those 13 games, how many times did he go out for 3 quarters with an injury?
Right.
So he's going to have opportunities. So to me, that's why, Blunt is the higher appeal here.
I read this question and I wrote down, who knows?
Right.
I
it really
guess
depends on Peterson's role.
Yeah, and Blunt's role.
I get. Yes, I agree, but I think Blunt's role is a lot more cemented than Adrian's. Because you guys hit it. Like, Peterson is sharing the backfield with guys with complete skill sets. Like, Blunt is sharing a backfield with Darren Sproles, and Eagles fan. I watched their games. Matthews had 8 touchdowns. Sproles had 2. Smallwood had 1. Kenyon Barner had 2. Terrell Watson had a rushing touchdown. And these were not 60-yard carries. They were 4-yard. Even the Sproles ones were 4-yard punch it in kind of things. So we're talking about 14 rushing touchdowns to only 16 passing touchdowns out of this team. And I think that changes a little bit, but Peterson wants to run the ball in from the 5. He just does. And Blunt might be able to do that. So I kind of – the way I see things shaking out, I still think Peterson is my answer to this question because he's just so special. And Kamara can do good things with the ball in his hands, but he doesn't like Mark Ingram. He doesn't care about Mark Ingram. You brought in Peterson for a reason, and it wasn't to play second fiddle. Right. So I do like Blunt. I actually like both of these players. If I end up with both of them as kind of like they split my RB2 or flex duties, I'm thrilled. But I think Peterson's going to have a bigger year than people are ready for. How about Crowell? Are we sleeping on this guy a little bit? He was RB14 last year, and now he has a far better offensive line, the best offensive line in the league. I'm saying it. There's no doubt in my mind. If Rocco, you made me laugh earlier. If you just want to make it 1D, like you're the king of adding the letters after the numbers.
Yes.
The Jets have the 127 offensive line of the league. But
wait, did you mean 127 or did you mean
that's correct.
1.27?
Yeah.
One Z.
I caught myself there. I almost said I don't know what the 27th letter of the alphabet is. That's not.
I was waiting for it. I really was. Don't stack the balls.
I do think it's the best. It's unquestionably a top 5 offensive line, and now it's Crowell's second year in the system there for Hugh Jackson. So, are we sleeping on him a little bit as RB17? Like, do we really think he's going to fall 3 slots with all the good things that happened for Cleveland?
Here's my thinking. I think we're all ready to say that Cleveland is not going to continue to be a laughingstock, but we still haven't seen them be anything other than a laughingstock yet. So it's really hard for us to get on board, and not just us. I think this is an industry thing. It's really hard for anyone to get on board with a Cleveland player at this point. And I love Crowell, and if he lands up on my team, I will be ecstatic. He won't because you're going to draft him before I get to him, probably like 2 picks before I would have taken him. But yeah, it's a Cleveland stigma thing. I don't think we're sleeping on him, and I think he's going to wind up doing very good things on a much improved team. he plays for the Browns. Like, we just have to live with that at this point.
Yeah, I think we possibly could be sleeping on him. I think I'll probably own him a lot. I have him ranked 18th, and I'll probably get to my 18th running back well before other people that are drafting running backs. But he looked great at times last year, but he also looked terrible at times last year. I think we see more of those great times, but the Browns are riding the ship, and I think Crow could be a part of that big turn. But, it takes a little time sometimes to turn a Titanic around.
Yikes.
I think it's just not a very sexy pick, to be honest with you. Like, a lot of these guys that are ahead of him are a lot of a more of established name. They're a lot flashier player, obviously. But from 2015 to 2016, he improved by a yard per carry. And all that offensive line has done is gotten way better. And I'm already on record. It's already written down that the Browns finished 2017 with the number 1 rated offensive line. Deal, you definitely wrote that down because it's going to happen.
Written down.
All right, so I'm not going to be surprised at all if Crowell sneaks into the top 10 running backs this year.
I'm with you.
The only thing that holds it back just a bit is, can they get the ball in the end zone, in the red zone, as an offense? And I think that with the improvements to the offensive line, with the way they're going to play, they'll be able to finish a lot more drives this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm never like this, but if I have fantasy teams that start 2 or even 3 running backs, and both or all 3 of my players are from this tier, I think you could still win a championship.
Agreed.
If my 3 running backs are Crowell, Blunt, and Peterson, I'm thrilled, because that also means the rest of my team is loaded with stars at receiver or quarterback. So really, really interesting going off of my usual running back drafting brain.
Yep.
So we'll see. All right, a couple quick questions here, roundtable. Try to focus on things we haven't talked much about so far, but based on pre-ranks, I mean, think about a player that you absolutely, number one, will not touch because the price is too high. And then give me another player that you're kind of hoping to have in every league. Not necessarily a sleeper. We talked about that the other week. I don't want to hear Kareem Hunt's name here. I just mean one of these guys, or maybe in the next 5 to 10 players that you think is going to give you a huge return on investment, and you want him in every league. For me, I'll just jump in. It's Crowell. I want Crowell in every single league. I'm going to be able to get him late, and I think he's giving you first-round value this year. I'm not even going to hide it anymore. I'm all over Crowell. I've got to have him as often as possible, and then my bad guy is Fournette. He's a first to mid second round pick, and you're talking about Cleveland. I think Cleveland's a way better offense at this point than Jacksonville, at least running wise.
Yeah.
So I'm not touching Fournette.
I'm not touching Todd Gurley. That's just me getting burned last year, and also the fact that maybe next year I think my opinion may change, but I need to see that offense be something other than the dreadful show that it was last year. Just the worst thing we've ever seen. That's how bad that offense was, and Todd was not the main reason for how bad it was, but he's the one that takes the blame, obviously. That's a guy I'm not touching. A guy that I want to own a lot is Dalvin Cook. We kind of skipped over him, but I know it's a rookie thing, but Minnesota's just in a position to really – they have the defense. They're rebuilding that offensive line. Sam Sleeves is Sam check down. We know that, but –
he might have 80 catches.
Yeah, he really could.
I'm only half kidding.
No, I know. He's constantly checking down to the tight end and the running back, so that bodes well for Cook. So if you're in a PPR, I'm all over it. And on top of it, I understand that he's not Adrian Peterson, but Adrian Peterson in Minnesota's offense, with a solid offensive line, is a 2,000-yard back. Cook can be a 1,300-yard back. You know what I mean? That's not out of the question to think. So even if he gives you 100 yards a game, rushing, receiving, and mixes in some touchdowns there, for the number 16 back, 15 back, that's insane. I'll take that all day.
I had the exact opposite answers. I won't own Dalvin because I'm not sure what they're doing there, and I want Todd 100%. and I think I can get him about one pick later than I would have normally taken him because there are so many people like you that got burned last season or that just saw other people get burned and don't trust them now. So I 100% want Todd.
Yeah, for me, the guy that I will not touch based on where you're going to have to grab him is Lamar Miller. I've been vocal about him before. My biggest knock on him is the touchdown aspect. Even if things open up a little bit for him this year, and I'm not completely sure they are because I like Watson for them, but their offensive line is not that good. That's the bigger issue with that team. I think he's only ever had double-digit touchdowns combined one time, and in that season he ran for 872 yards. So, it's kind of he's just a weird player. I cannot peg him at all, and I'm not going to spend a first or second round pick on a guy who might turn around and give me 7 touchdowns. I just can't do it. The guy that I want, as much as I can get him, is Ty Montgomery. Volume is king. That's another high-profile offense that runs a ton of plays, especially if you're in a PPR or half PPR format. He's going to steal 40 to 50 catches, almost guaranteed this season. There's nobody else on that roster that from day one is going to jump him. He's now got a full offseason as a running back, understanding now the protection element of everything. Aaron Rodgers is comfortable with him, so I just don't see a rookie jumping him or knocking him down enough that I don't want that volume.
We'll see. I think you're actually – I'm not going to grab him, but I think you're probably low on that 40 to 50 catches.
Right.
We will
try not to get grilled here.
All right, so we haven't touched much on this. Rock just hit on Dalvin, but we have 4 rookies in our top 16, which is a little bit crazy. We have Fournette up there, and then right in a row, bang, bang, bang with Cook, McCaffrey, and Mixon. Is this based on what we've seen the last 2 seasons? Guys like Todd Gurley, Zeke Elliott, Jordan Howard, who absolutely tore it up their rookie years. Historically, running back has not been an impossible spot to tear it up as a rookie. If you just sort of get the pass protection element of the game, then there's not much else that doesn't translate. But do you think it's because these 4 players are actually skilled enough to get the job done and they're in good enough offenses, they're in good enough spots to warrant, every week RB1, RB2, because that's where we have them? Or is this we just think it could happen because it has the last 3 years? So I guess situation specific because of the past, or do we think these guys really are worth where they're rated?
I think we're seeing an amazing group of running backs come out in the draft over the last 3 years, and looking forward to the future with what's to come. We're looking at a time in the NFL where we're going to have a really special group of running backs, and I think all 4 of these guys fit into that group. I don't think they're all even the same type of running back. Fournette is a monster on every level in size, speed. McCaffrey obviously is the do-it-all type of guy who can be that running back for you, but does it out of the backfield. Cook is a nice mix. Mixon could be the best back in this entire class, if it wasn't for the legal issues he had in college. So when you start talking about these guys, they all give you a very special skill set. They're also, all 4 of them, in really good situations. Fournette, you could say that Yeldon is competing, but it's Fournette's job. It's Cook's job. Mixon has to fight off a couple of people, but McCaffrey, it's pretty much his job too, because he's not going to just line up at running back and that's how he's going to be involved. You know what I mean? So all 4 of these guys are going to get touches. 3 of them, I think, outside of Mixon, the other 3 are going to get major touches. So I think it's situational for them, that it just happens that we like them so much. I think, obviously, if they went to different situations, that we might not have them as highly rated.
Yeah, look, volume is key in just about everything with fantasy, but especially in this argument here. These are guys that are all going – first of all, they are extremely talented coming right out of college. And I think college coaches and college programs are doing a much better job of getting running backs ready for the next level, understanding protection schemes so that a coach doesn't say, oh, well, he had to, take a back burner for a year and a half until he understood how to protect the quarterback and, that whole kind of tired excuse, in my opinion. But these are guys that are all coming into a position where they should, by all accounts, be the guy in that backfield. Fournette, to me, is a no-brainer. Like, you just got to cut ties with the other two backs there and just find out, basically just be the guy. We talked about Mixon. We talked about Cook. We talked about McCaffrey. They're all dual threats. So you got teams who are going to find ways to get the ball in their hands. It's a use and abuse type league right now with running backs where nobody's taking that approach anymore of saying, well, we got to make sure that, we safeguard the future with the touches. I think people are understanding that you can kind of recycle the position a little bit. And if you find somebody that's extremely special, that's a different story. But, overall, I think that the turnover and the way that guys can just step right in and play right away is huge.
I don't know that there's ever been a time in my 15 years of playing fantasy football where I've drafted a rookie in the first or second round, and I don't think that'll change this year. Probably of all these guys, the only one I have a legitimate chance of owning is Mixon, because I'll get him a little – like when I'm taking my third running back and half my league's only taking their second. So other guys, I won't own.
I won't touch any of these four guys. You guys can write that down. And obviously what I mean, if it's the 9th round, but it just won't be.
Right.
And honestly, it's not a rookie thing for me. I have no fear of rookies. Ezekiel Elliott, I was clear with you guys last year, was my number 3 overall player going into drafts last year. I don't mind rookies. These are 4 of the worst offensive lines in the entire football league.
Right.
4 of the worst. Jacksonville is terrible. Minnesota is really terrible. Carolina, okay, but my nervousness there, we've never seen it work with a back like McCaffrey. I was shocked to hear how much they loved him.
And Stu's still good.
Yeah, and you think about the types of backs, like you're going to run a power run with McCaffrey and Newton. Now, I think he's going to be a PPR machine in a year or two. Maybe not right now, though. And then Cincinnati was a very average line last year, and they lost their 2 best linemen in Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler. So I just hate the situations for all 4 of these guys. I love all 4 as players. As an Eagles fan, I wanted them to draft one of these guys. It didn't happen. But I hate the situations. So for me, it's not, kind of a trick question, I guess, the way I worded it. It's not a rookie thing. I love the running back renaissance, and I'll tell you right now, I'm drafting Saquon Barkley in every league next year. I don't even care where he ends up. But these 4 guys, I just hate their situations so much.
Even though that 3 of them are going to be like the back, it's still
the only one I'm positive is going to be the back is Fournette.
Really?
I'm just really intrigued to see how McCaffrey's going to fit. Now, I will say they drafted him 8th, probably with a plan in mind.
Yeah.
I doubt they took him 8th and were like, let's see how this goes. I don't know. All right, but the Vikings, I can see at least year 1 being a little bit of a timeshare with Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon, being that they're okay backs. They're not Cook, but they're okay. And then in Cincinnati, God only knows how that's going to work out. They like Gio, and they like Jeremy Hill. I don't know why, but they keep feeding him the ball. So
okay,
those guys, it's more of an until I see it kind of situation. But the volume is there. Similarly ranked guys have similar volume, and I know more about their situation, and I like their line a ton more.
See, my whole thing is, and not to beat a dead horse, but all 4 of these guys were first round. Well, I'm sorry, 3 of them were first round picks, and one of them was a second round pick. So they were all high draft picks. Like, there's a reason why they took them. You know what I mean?
I hear you. I hear you, but that reason's not always year 1.
I get that, but like at least, like I said, maybe Mixon is different because he's got a more crowded backfield. I think Fournette and Cook are guaranteed, and like I said with McCaffrey, he's going to give you so much more than just the running game. You know what I mean? So that's why. I mean, I could see somewhat of a slow going for him in the running game. He's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. He's going to line up in the slot. He's going to give you punt return and kick return yardage too, probably.
Stop it.
But no,
for fantasy.
But for the purpose of touchdowns, like it's there. I understand that we're not counting those yards, but the ability for him to break one in those positions, he may give you 2 touchdowns from that spot this year. So,
yeah, I guess for me to kind of put a button on the question, just to respond to you, those backs, you know, I've already talked about Fournette's way too rich for my blood, but if we're talking Cook, McCaffrey, Mixon, the next guys we have on the list, Crowell, Hyde, Blunt, Peterson, I want all of them over any of the other 3 backs. I want Gillislee over them. I even want Eddie Lacy over those guys. You know, and it's not in a situation of like a pre-rank thing for the good of the public, but if we're talking about me drafting my team, I would rather wait a round or 2 and get the guy that I think will have similar, if not better, production in Crowell than have to reach for one of these rookies and hope the situation's as good as I think it could be.
I agree.
Fair.
So it's more, you know, again, it's not that I'm going to say Hyde's going to score more fantasy points this year than Dalvin Cook, but I will say I would own Hyde before I would own Cook because of the draft capital. All right, last question here, kind of talking about committees. You know, we've talked, you know, South's big thing is volume is king, and he's absolutely right. So the problem therein lies that there are a lot of committee approaches here in the league, you know. So as an owner, how do you kind of sift through all of these committee approaches? I mean, so many teams have 1 guy, 2 guys, even top 10 backs like Devontae Freeman that we've touched on have competition for touches. So as you look at your different settings types of different leagues, you know, even to the point of like how big your league is team-wise, you know, how do you decide which back you're going to target from those backfields? Maybe less the Freeman-Coleman one and more like the Amir Abdullah, Theo Riddick, Zach Zenner, Matt Asiata cluster we've got going on in Detroit right now. You know, and try to avoid just saying, I don't touch it. You know, let's say you had to, because I saw Deal shaking his head, and I know his answer is the same as mine. But, you know, how do you decide which of those guys you're kind of going to target?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's always trying to get as much volume as I can out of a player, and I know people are going to get sick of me saying the word volume, but you're going to hear it probably 50 more times, you know, by, you know, a month from now. But you can't ignore the situation, because if you ignore the situation completely and you look at it, you know, a Jeremy Langford, Jordan Howard situation of last year where, you know, people tended to be a little higher on Langford, but you knew it was a committee approach, and you have to keep your ear to the ground. You have to be reading and watching and listening, getting a feel for what the team is saying about these guys, how they're being used, just understand like who's making the most out of their opportunities. Keep a close watch on it. If you're not going to draft somebody from the Detroit situation, you still need to be monitoring that, because if all of a sudden every word coming out of there is that Amir Abdullah looks lights out, he's doing it all, he's super productive, they're going to start giving him more touches, then obviously, you know, you want to be looking toward picking him up or finding a spot for him to kind of stash him away a little bit. It's exactly what I was able to do with Jordan Howard last year. I just kept listening with my ear to the ground and understanding that, okay, everything I'm reading saying is that this is the more talented back. And eventually he's going to show that. And it pays off. Now, from time to time, you're going to pick up a guy, you know, like a Kareem Hunt, and it's just not going to work out, because you're going to hear he's the more talented back. Watch for him. He's a sleeper. And it just doesn't work out. But, you know, I'd rather miss a couple times and then eventually hit on a monster like Jordan Howard than just completely ignore the situation.
Yeah, because the time you hit, you win the championship.
And you look like a genius.
Right.
With Amir Abdullah, I got my ear all the way to the ground, South. All the way to the ground, man. I sift through this. The main way I sift through it is by not wasting my first 2 rounds on any position other than running back. Get studs at the top so you don't have to worry later. Well, now I still got to fill my starting positions with big question marks. Get studs at the top.
Obviously, the idea is to get studs at the top, but
not for a lot of people.
When you're actually going to when you actually start drafting in this group, you play in PPR leagues. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Every league that I'm in is at least a half-point PPR. So I'm looking at, to use South's word, I'm looking at volume, and not just in the rushing attempts. I want to see guys like Theoretic who are catching 60 balls. I want to see guys like Duke Johnson who are contributing greatly in the passing game, because that's touches on top of the rushing attempts. You know what I mean? So that's one of the biggest things I look for is who's touching the ball more than just rushing attempts.
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of with Deal where I'm not trying to rely on any of these guys. So when I'm going to take one kind of later in a draft, it's the Jordan Howard over the Jeremy Langford 100% of the time. Which guy, when it comes down to later in the season, bye weeks, playoffs, which guy's probably going to have the reins on it? Now, you can't say that in a situation like Coleman Freeman. That's pretty much a split there. But in a situation like, again, we'll go back to Murray and Derrick Henry. I'll have Derrick Henry more than Murray if I have either this year, because when push comes to shove late in the season, if we saw it in his rookie year, then his second season, we're definitely going to see more Henry than Murray late in the season. And that's when I care more. You know, I don't care week 2. I can take a loss week 2 if I need to, but I can't take a loss week 15. So who's going to be kind of carrying the ball later in the season is kind of my beef with that. All right, so sadly enough, that's going to do it here for this edition of the Goons podcast. I mean, I know we went a little bit later than we've trended here lately, but listen, if you want to win your league, you got to listen to every second of every piece of information you can get from any source about the running back position. You know, we love that you're tuning in for us. We think we're pretty decent with this, but you need to have a plan at running back. Everything else you can figure out. You've got to have a plan at running back. So dedicate your time to that. You know, we've been clear with that from day one. I know some industry kind of led you astray last year. We will not. We love the running backs, so we'll figure that out. But we do hope you enjoyed our discussion. Again, we're asking you to continue getting active for us here on social media. We want that presence to grow. We want our program to grow. We need your help with it. We are continuously updating our consensus fantasy football rankings on the site, helping you refine your boards and prepare for your drafts. Those change at this point at least weekly from one or more of the Goons. So make sure you keep checking it out. Next week, we're going to talk about wide receivers. You know, kind of a position creeping up on running back, still number 2, but very critical to your league. So we're going to talk about that next week, kind of in a similar format of this week. So we're looking forward to that already. As always, you can find us here on footballgoons.com, facebook.com/footballgoons, and on the Twitter @footballgoons. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube to catch notifications when we're going live. We are going to run a special next week, a little bit of a contest. Anybody who submits a question, we are going to pick questions to go through on our podcast. Our favorite question will absolutely get a t-shirt next week. So we're throwing that out to you. We can announce that live on the podcast next week. So whichever one we pick as our question of the week for our wide receiver podcast will win a t-shirt. So we're looking forward to that contest. Thanks again for the listen and your time. And as always, we'll catch you next time.